interconnected. So if you're going to talk about the manipulation of space, which would allow a UFO to come from either one part of this universe to this part or another universe to our universe, you also have to take into account they may be coming from another time to
Right.
this time. You know, if you talk about things like wormholes that connect different points in the universe, they could also connect different universes, and they can connect different times because everything is interconnected. So why would we not think that an advanced civilization that has figured out how to do this stuff that we're trying to do,
Hmm.
that they would not also be able to manipulate and alter the timeline as well? So I absolutely think that that's a huge interest, I guess you could say.
Hmm.
And a lot of the conspiracies involving time travel, Project Montauk and what have you, even the Philadelphia experiment, whether you believe anything happened or not, it did involve the manipulation of the EM field. So
Yeah.
obviously this stuff's been around for a while. Somebody knows that it's a real good avenue to to go. And I think that you have to include time with that. It's not just about manipulating space.
Even more conventional experiments have happened, like the was it the Hafele Keating experiment?
Right, where they send two planes around the world, and yeah, and they're able to show that there is a little bit of time difference that occurs. And
Yeah, how does
sure, I
that
mean,
work?
how can I verbalize this?
Was that just I mean, basically the faster they go, I mean the clock's kind of
Well,
slowed by a
that's
few
time.
nanoseconds?
Yes, it's time dilation. I mean, like the Einstein stuff we learned in high school, the
Hmm.
idea that the closer you come to the speed of light, even if it's incremental, the slower time will appear to the person who is in motion.
Hmm.
That doesn't occur to the person who's the stationary observer. And of course, that's the whole relativity thing. But I think what needs to be emphasized is, again, it's our natural tendency to think that space and time are separate. So it's like, okay, well, things that we could do in a spatial sense, we don't include time into that, but we
Hmm.
have to. I mean, they're interwoven. I mean, that's what the physicists tell us. Space time
Yeah.
is an interwoven fabric or continuum, and so what you do to one, you have to be able to do to the other.
Well, what are a couple of your favorite, more recent time discoveries or experiments that have happened?
Well, unfortunately, they didn't lead anywhere.
Well, yeah.
I know. Well, I think they do though. I think even the failures, like last year, everybody was screaming and yelling over the opera facility in Italy and
Hmm. Yeah.
and the possibility that we have found a particle that could, breach faster than light speed, and that was the neutrino, which is really cool because that's a particle that has no mass.
Right.
How they were able to measure it, I'm not even going to get into. I don't even know. But so they did an experiment. They duplicated it actually several times, and that's what got everybody excited. Oh my God, we finally found a particle that can go faster than the speed of light. Well, what happened was they also eventually discovered that there were some technical glitches with the GPS tracking system.
Of
Like
course.
a cable, something as dumb as a cable. And the reason why they kept getting the same result is just simply because they didn't know that those anomalies existed. So the test just kept coming out positive. But the interesting thing is it opened the door to the possibility that there are particles out there, like the mysterious tachyon that everybody used to talk
Hmm.
about, that may be proven one day through these amazing experiments to go faster than light. And if that's the case, you could extrapolate that to possibly mean a bigger object made up of many particles could do that. Michio Kaku, my favorite theoretical physicist, I mean, he said really, and I'm totally paraphrasing here, that it all comes down to the engineering. Time travel is possible, but it's an engineering problem now. It's like, okay, theoretically, we know a lot of different ways that it could possibly work, but we need to actually build, quote unquote, the machine, so to speak.
Yeah, that is a great way to say it, that it's an engineering problem.
Yeah.
Um,
Now you know what? If he's saying that,
right. Well, that's the thing. I was gonna say I used to really love him, and then I just got way deep down the rabbit hole, and now, I mean, he seems boring. No offense to him. No offense to him, but the conventional seems just a bit boring when you're
I
looking into
know
some
it.
of this crazy stuff.
But can you imagine? I mean, think about the things he talks about and how, how they would have played 100 years ago. People would have thought
True.
Harry Potter,
Yeah, that's true.
magician.
Well, given the research that you have done, how would you describe time? Is it a fourth dimension or more of an illusion created by the mind?
Both.
Right.
Well, we do treat it as a dimension separate, uh, the temporal dimension, along with our three spatial. But again, when we talk about time space, we include all four. But the thing is that the only place that linear time, the arrow of time from past, present to future, really occurs is within the structures of the human brain.
Yeah.
In a cosmic sense and in a quantum sense, there is no linear time.
Yeah.
We as human beings and all living things, I think, we all have brains, even little creatures. Our brains are designed that way for a reason, and that is functionality, and that is to be able to survive and reproduce and have lives that have order and have some meaning. I mean, there's a purpose for life, and that is really to reproduce itself.
Yeah.
And whatever destiny we may be moving towards as a species, the goal is to keep reproducing. And in order to do that, there has to be a very structured timeline. But beyond the brain, when we get to things like mind and consciousness, when we get out there in the universe where the laws of physics may not necessarily all be the same, the further out you go, when we talk about other universes and you
Hmm.
excuse me, other laws of physics that may apply there that will look like magic to us. Time is fluid. It's not fixed. It doesn't exist in a linear fashion. Past, present, and future are all laid out at once, which means that we should be able to access information from the past, present, and future anytime we want if we could figure out how to do so, which, Larry and I think that we kind of have in a way. And that's where all the mental time travel stuff kind of comes into play.
Nice. I mean, it is tough to discuss theories of time travel and time itself really without trying to define the framework of reality itself. I mean,
Yeah.
considering that your book you touch on so many of the major theories like string theory, the multiverse or membrane theory, the holographic universe, which seems most plausible to you? How would you try to explain reality?
Well, okay, I'm not a physicist. Oh, explain reality? It's illusion. Um, okay.
On so many levels.
Yeah, I really think that, all right, here's the deal. I think reality is made up of many levels. And we exist in one mainly, again, for functionality and survival purposes. But we have access to, on occasion, those other realities. And we call them paranormal. We call them anomalous phenomenon. We call them dreams and deja vu and
Yeah.
cognition and remote viewing and psychic.
Those are the real clues.
Yeah, yeah. But see, think about it. We're not meant to always be able to do that stuff because if we did, we wouldn't be able to have one functional life with the purpose of which is to continue to reproduce to keep the species going.
Hmm.
Um, so to me, and this is what our next book is about, it's called The Grid, Exploring the Hidden Infrastructure of Reality, believe it or
Oh,
not.
that sounds great.
Yeah, well, what we're going to do, it's sort of an introductory book where we're going to bring together a lot of these theories and a lot of our research and try to show how, if there were a visible structure, what it might be like. Because, we're visual creatures and we like to have symbols and images. So we thought of a three-dimensional grid, and the way you have these different levels and you've got connectors, to
Hmm. Hmm.
connecting each level. So we're on one of those, right? That's our day-to-day normal reality. But we could go up and down and side to side on those connectors and experience other realities on occasion. And possibly death is just another level of the grid.
Yeah.
You go one up or you go one down, whatever.
I assume you would talk a little bit about psychedelics in that
Heck
regard.
yeah, absolutely, because those are triggers or mechanisms, if you will, by which the brain sort of is pushed into experiencing other levels of reality that normally it would not be aware of. And again, that's because of functionality. I mean, if we were always tripping out on all these other
Yeah.
realities, most of us would not get anything accomplished. We wouldn't, have babies and keep
Right.
species going. And so, yeah, definitely things like meditation, chanting, Oh my gosh, anything, shamanism where they do drumming and anything that takes consciousness or takes your brain waves and elevates them so that you can experience something other than the normal everyday waking state.
I mean, I've had a couple of psychedelic experiences that, to some friends of mine who haven't, they write them off as a hallucination because that's the conventional model. But when you have the experience, it seems so real. Like your internal dialogue is kept intact. You can still think, but you're just like, man, something is off. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Well, you know
Uh,
what's funny? There was an article, I think, God, last week, that you talk about hallucinations, how ironic, that talked about how, again, for the longest time, people thought hallucinations were just a triviality. And
mhm.
yet they, like dreams, can seem 100% real to the brain. So the brain doesn't differentiate between a very vivid hallucination or, say, a really vivid dream and you and I talking right now in what we consider to be our waking state. Those are different realities to the brain. And if you've had a dream where you something really sad happens, you cry, you feel emotion in dreams, you feel terror, uh, you
Yeah.
know, their sexual dreams. I mean, our bodies and our brains react to those experiences as if they were just as real as the waking state. So even hallucinations now are being taken a little more seriously. It's about time.
Yeah, dreams are a messed up thing because you'll be sleeping with your partner and you have a dream that they cheated on you and you wake up and you're kind of like, what the fuck, you know? But
You
and
start
they're
getting all testy and like, what did I
yeah,
do?
and
I do.
you know it's stupid, but it's like you can't you wake up in a slightly bad mood. It takes a minute to shake it off.
It does, and that proves just how realistic what happens on the other side of sleep really is. I love it. I think it's so cool because when I started to realize, I never bought into that whole thing about how dreams are just your subconscious trying to, the Freudian stuff
Try to
work
speak
out.
to you.
Yeah, well, and I do think that does happen. But I really think of dreams as more of experiences of other universes, other realities. Maybe we're slipping into the multiverse and and that's why things seem so bizarre in dreams because we're operating in those multiverses with different laws of physics. So it looks like magic. You can turn into a pink pony, you know, or you can fly.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I'm sure Freud was right on some of that stuff. Pretty sure if you keep dreaming of plane crashes, it means your life is a mess. But at the
Well,
same time, I think people know the difference between maybe a symbolic dream and one where they're in another world.
yeah. I mean, I know you're familiar with Anthony Peake.
Ah, yes, yes, we're doing
Yes,
a lot of the similar work too.
true.
His
Uh,
book came out is about time and deja vu and all that stuff.
Oh, he's great. I talked to him a while ago, maybe it was even almost a year ago, but something I discussed with him is like I like the idea that our dreams are just as real as our waking life. It's just a different type of reality. But
Right.
when when you have sex with someone in a dream and you see that person, if I feel like shouldn't they remember that experience? Is that not them? Is it a manifestation of them?
Their doppelganger?
Yeah,
That's a really good question. And the thing is, well, either they don't want to admit that they know, or, I think that there are people that are more sensitive to these other realities. So it could be that they didn't even, you have dreams that you don't remember, right?
mhm,
And then you
mhm.
have others where you could remember vivid details for years.
I have waking life I don't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember my 20s, but I don't know. I think that's a really good question, but I think it could be either um, they're just not on the same wavelength, so to speak, in terms of remembering dreams, or it wasn't quite them in this reality. It was them in a parallel universe. So consciously, they don't have memory of it. But for some
Yeah.
reason, you do. I don't know. That's a good question.
Usually that's called date rape, but it's some form of dream rape, I guess.
Oh my God, that's funny.
Well, hey, let's talk a little bit about some of the time mysteries and the conspiracies that you wrote about.
Oh God.
What about the John Teeter situation? What's your opinion of him?
Well, I gotta be honest with you. I don't remember this happening. I mean, at the time that it happened in the early
Mm-hmm.
2000s, for those of you who don't know who John Teeter is, he was a excuse me, alleged time traveler that showed up on internet bulletin boards back in, I think, the year 2000,
Yeah.
2001, and just all of a sudden started posting um, that he was a time traveler from the year 2036. He was trying to get home. He had been sent here from the future to pick up an archaic IBM computer system from like the 1970s for whatever reason.
Yeah, that was sketchy.
Yeah. And, for some reason he didn't go home right away. So he ended up posting all kinds of information about this time machine that he had created and how it worked, how it was manufactured by GE. And, a lot of his science was right on the money. I mean, he obviously, excuse me, knew a lot of the research that was being conducted into different time travel theories and mechanisms by which you could create a time travel device. He was up on all that. But he started also posting like predictions and
Right.
almost prophecies. Very few of them came true. Most of them were so vague that they could have come true. You never would have known.
Right.
And apparently he kept a time travel device in a back of a 1967 Chevy Corvette convertible. And I only giggle just because it's, but he did post
A little Back to the
diagrams.
Future.
Yeah. He posted diagrams and an instruction manual, and a lot of people that looked at it said, hey, there may be something to this. I know he was on Coast to Coast. Art Bell had faxes with him and conversations, but then he just kind of vanished.
And went home.
Yeah, probably, yeah. Or maybe he went back to 1975 to get another IBM and got stuck there. Who knows? But there was a lot of speculation as to who he might be, or if it was just one big. It was the beginning of the viral internet fraud. Who knows?
Yeah.
He was just one of many people that have shown up claiming to be time travelers or claiming to have been part of some government experiment, some, top secret time travel experiment. And the thing is that how do you prove that they were and how do you prove that they weren't?
I know. I mean, another one of those guys, a pretty out there time travel conspiracy, is the Andy Bisagio.
I know. I'm Italian. Yeah. I have a hard time saying his name. Andrew Bisagio. Bisagio. Yeah. Great.
Project Pegasus. Let's say it that way. But I definitely think weird time travel experiments have happened and been done in secret, but I wrote a pretty disapproving piece after I attended one of his lectures in San Diego.
Hey, did you ever actually hear him speak? Okay, so yeah.
Yeah. I think he's full of shit, but I can never be 100% sure, but it's just that he gives a presentation in 2011 saying that Carter, Clinton, Bush, and Obama would all be president. Well, where was that presentation in 1970,
Exactly.
When it mattered.
It's like after the fact or when we're pretty sure we could have made the same prediction.
Yeah, and when I asked him who the next president would be, I'm like, give me something in the future. You time traveled up until today and that's all you know? He said he would be the next president. He expected himself to be the next president.
You know that he's running. I swear to you, he's running for president for 2016.
Well, it's just, I mean, yeah, you can run, but
let's work on his campaign. No, I mean, I laugh too because I feel just like you do. I've listened to interviews. I've heard him. I've seen the YouTubes. What's really intriguing about him is the level of detail that he retains on these experiences. Because you think about, when people lie and they make stuff up, they don't always remember the fine details unless they have one of these photographic memories or it's all written down and they're reading off a script.
True.
So, and I've heard a lot of people say, I was blown away by his detail, the level of recall. But the stuff that he was saying was just ridiculous. And also his, stating that he was in this, like, we have it in the book, this picture that at Gettysburg of a little kid.
Yes.
And it's like, that's just a picture of somebody. That's nothing. That could be anybody.
Right. He claims he time traveled to the Gettysburg Address, and there is a picture of him captured, and then it was in Time magazine, for those who don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a picture of a kid during the Gettysburg Address, I guess.
Yeah, and, but he's claiming that the kid is dressed in a way with, like, these big street shoes where you would be able to identify him as not being of that time. But I looked at that picture and I looked at that kid's clothing and he looks like he could fit into that time frame perfectly. And there have been other time travel, urban legends of people that looked like they were out of time. They were dressed differently, but they've always been discredited by somebody who said, at that time there were clothes available that look like that. So
True.
it's just our weird desire, I guess, to believe that the government is always way ahead of the game, which they very well could be.
I definitely think they are.
Yeah. But some of these people that claim that they were child, chrononauts back in the 70s and the 80s, I just need more proof. I'm sorry.
I
Show
agree.
me. Show
uh,
me the chair that you sat in that manipulated the EM field. And another thing that was funny is that I guess this chair, this Montauk chair, kind of fell into a wormhole beneath it. But it didn't
oh,
actually fall. It was more of a mental thing, I guess. But how funny that sounds just like that Carl Sagan movie, Contact.
true.
Have you've seen it?
Yeah, yeah.
She's sitting in the chair, and below her are the gyroscopes spinning and spinning, and then the chair drops into the wormhole. But the observers see nothing happen. The chair
Yeah.
doesn't drop, but she feels that it drops. So I don't know. I thought that was a little bit coincidental.
Yeah. I've watched it again in modern times and I like it a lot better, but at the time I was so young. I mean, that was like what, 91 or something, I think. I was in like second grade and I was just pissed that there weren't aliens until the last 5 minutes.
I know a lot of people give him crap about that, and that was based on his novel, which had been out. But he really wanted to try to, do like a more realistic.
Yeah, it's good now. I mean, when you think about it in those terms, it is a really good
Yeah,
movie.
because the alien took on the guise of her father, so that it didn't scare the crap out of her.
Hmm.
Which, if they're really that intelligent, that makes sense.
Something else that's in your book that I found interesting that I'd never heard about before is chronostasia. Can you explain that?
Yeah, that's where things got really cool for me and Larry, because I
Hmm.
mean, all this stuff is fascinating. The science can give you a real big headache. The conspiracies are fun, but we always felt like we wanted to look at the more paranormal aspects of time travel. And we were really, really lucky that our publisher, New Page Books, let us put this in there because originally they just wanted us to do like straight science.
Hmm.
No, 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 we're already time traveling. We want to talk about that too. So, chronesthesia, mental time travel really encompasses so many things. We're not talking about memory. Okay, people say, well, memory is a form of time travel. Yes, it is, but memory is tainted by the present. In other words, what you look back on in your past, chances are that's not what really happened. Memory morphs and changes over time.
Agreed.
Chronesthesia, though, it's a way of the brain to travel back and forth in time. It does it mentally, but it does it in subjective time. It's a lot more realistic. There's a lot greater detail of recall, perception, and memory, and all that stuff can really, again, kind of taint what it is that you remember. Like if you remember getting in a fight with a girlfriend 2 years ago, chances are you're adding and embellishing some things, and she'll
Right.
do the same. But chronesthesia allows the brain to literally go back and see how it really was. So that's just something that a lot of, I guess in the neurological community, the brain research is looking at subjective time travel. And again, we want to do it physically because we're physical creatures. We want to be able to get in a little craft and go back to the past or into the future. But how cool is it that maybe the real research should be in how we're already doing it with our brains and our minds?
Well, I'd say, how does that work? Because you have to have, even in quantum physics, there needs to be a. They're coming to the terms that it needs to be a conscious observer. Like, how would you go back without, like, just mentally, without being a conscious observer? Don't you need a vessel, even if it is just a body?
I think we go back to the past all the time in terms of mind or consciousness or whatever it is that we're
Just
projecting.
thought.
Well, okay. I mean, we can't prove that they're real, but some people, when they have deja vu, they have a deja vu in a particular location where they really get this overwhelming feeling that they've been in that location before, but
Yes.
maybe during, the building of the pyramids or what have you. And it really just feels so realistic that they can actually identify places that, they've never been to before. So how is the brain accessing that? It's as if there's a part of us, and I really do believe that mind is separate from the brain. I'm one of those that can transcend the physical limitations of the way that we have to perceive linear time and can kind of go beyond the body into the future, like when you have a precognitive dream of a car crash that ends up happening 2 weeks later,
Hmm.
or back into the past when you see yourself so vividly in another lifetime, maybe, that you're able to corroborate even. And that's happened so many times that it's hard to discount those kinds of experiences. So I think it's different than just remembering. It's different from reading about something and then recalling what you read. It's, so deeply experiential, and yet there are ways that you can corroborate. For
Hmm.
example, there have been people who've had past life visions where they've, children even, where they've seen people, they've heard names, they've street names, and they've been able to literally corroborate that those people existed, the streets existed at the time the vision occurred, blah, blah, blah. And again, precognition. I mean, there are people that can predict a future event. I've done it myself, not in a way that is real grand, but I have had gut hunches where I knew there was going to be an earthquake in a few days. Now, maybe it was my body reacting to seismic activity, just below the surface, what have you. But,
Possible.
people who said that they were supposed to get on one of those planes at 9/11 and they just knew not to. To me, that's precognition.
Yeah.
You
What about the
can't.
people who did get on the plane? Are they just not tuned in?
Yeah, there's two ways to look at that. Either they did get the same signals, but they ignored them, because how many times do we do that?
Right. Got to get to work. Got
Yeah,
to.
exactly. I can't have my boss fire me. I can't lose my job. Or they didn't because, again, of what we talked about earlier, where there may be, certain physiological differences between the person who got the kick in the gut to say, no, don't get on that plane, and the one who maybe got a little bit of an inkling that something was off that day, but it wasn't strong enough for them to pinpoint or the association with getting on a plane. So, I mean, to me,
Hmm.
that's just differences in the way that we're made.
I really like the idea of following, some type of communication with the universe. There's actually a movie called Jeff Who Lives at Home with Jason Segel. It's kind of a comedy movie, but it's a little weird, so it didn't really reach the mainstream. But he basically follows all these messages. Like he gets a wrong, somebody calls and asks for Michael, and it's a wrong number. So then throughout the day, he's looking for a Michael. He sees a guy with it on his jersey. He follows that guy, and
Oh, God.
it's a pretty damn cool movie. And like
Oh, cool. I have to look for it on Netflix or something.
yeah, yeah. I wish I could live like that, but it
But you
just there's so
can.
many commitments.
See, that's the thing. And it gets into a little bit of a metaphysical arena here. But the thing is that I think, and getting back to even time and the perception of linear time, I think we are constantly bombarded with opportunities to look beyond the five senses at that deeper reality, to get beyond the
Yes.
illusion of reality, which is nothing but our conditioning and beliefs and our perception, all of which is messed up.
Yeah.
And we get those little glimpses. But here's the thing. How often do you slow down long enough to pay attention to them when you've got, and I'm not just saying you, I mean
Yeah.
all of
The
us.
royal you.
Yeah, when we're on the computer or we're on Facebook, we've got our faces buried in our cell phones. We don't even talk to each other. How do we ever slow down long enough to get the signals, synchronicities, the intuition, even gut
Hmm.
instinct is trying to tell you something. And I really know so many people that blow right over all that communication from the universe because they're focused on getting to work, getting the kids to school, finding something to eat, fighting with their spouse or their girlfriend or boy. I think everybody gets those signals, but not everybody will pay attention.
True. There's actually another strange phenomenon in your book that people make claims to, which is the time slips. What
Yeah.
what are some of the more interesting cases, like the principles of St. Hugh's? That was a pretty interesting one.
It's funny because the reason why we wanted to include that is because we were talking about missing time, and Larry and I've written about missing time because we both had missing time experiences that were very similar, where he was with a group of people that actually lost 2 hours of time together. I was
Wow.
myself on a freeway in Los Angeles. So, I'm a huge fan of Jenny Randall's and the work that she does. She's written some brilliant books. Her book, Time Storms, looks at time slips, time travel, time shifts, time anomalies of the yin yang. But a time slip is nothing more than you might be at a particular location, or you may be out walking or riding a bike, driving a car, and suddenly it's as if you're zapped into another time frame. And it could be the past, it could be the future. It could also happen that are you come out of this sort of disoriented fog and you're 500 miles up the road. It's 10 hours later, but all you were doing was going to the corner store, which should have
Hmm.
taken 10 minutes. So they're like time disorienting experiences, I guess you could say. But some of the ones that we looked at occurred in the Victorian era. Oh gosh, let me see if I can remember some of the details. Yeah, well, consider the most famous time slip is the story of two English women that apparently had a time slip. This is way back in 1901 while they were walking through the gardens of Versailles, France, looking for a path to go to one particular place that they wanted to visit, which was the Palace of Marie Antoinette. And they both had just the same feeling of disorientation, which is always associated with time slips. And I can
Hmm.
attest even that to missing time, that right before my missing time, I had an incredible period of disorientation to the point where I couldn't open a door. The door kept closing on me.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really freaky. Um, so anyway, they apparently showed up at some deserted farmhouse. There were people that they talked to and came in contact with that were all dressed very much in Victorian type clothing, and they had conversations. And then, of course, when they came out of it, they really felt like something. And here's the thing: if it would have just happened to one of them, we could easily pass it off as well. Maybe she had low blood sugar. It was just a little.
Yeah, two people
It
though.
happened to two people. Now that's an older story. For some really interesting newer stories, I again highly suggest Jenny Randall's book Time Storms, because she covers a lot of really current cases where people enter this weird electrical fog. It could be greenish even, where there's a lot of static, a lot of
Hmm.
electromagnetic anomalies occur. People's watches stop. If they're in a car, the car dies, what have you, in this weird fog. And then when the fog lifts or they come out the other side, that time slip has occurred. So what is up with that? Because if, anybody who knows anything about the Bermuda Triangle,
Yep.
there's the association with electronic fogs, a lot of UFO cases. And that's another thing about time slips and missing time is there's a lot of association with UFOs, sightings, abductions, what have you. So it's just some really cool time anomaly stuff that's out there already happening to people where they could be time traveling and not really want to do it in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, another recent guest, Nick Redfern, he wrote about in his most recent book, The World's Weirdest Places.
Uh-huh.
He talks about the Bermuda Triangle. I mean, I'm sure you know he also writes about, your ideas about of these possible gateways or these
Yeah,
portals.
I
And
love Nick. He's awesome, and he's one of the groundbreakers of. When I wrote my book Science, which was my first real big nonfiction book, I interviewed him for it. We got on the conversation of things like tulpas, creatures that are literally created out of collective consciousness, and
yeah,
the multiverse. Because again, at the time, we were just thinking of UFOs as being, you know, from just
yeah, just
Venus.
metal craft. Yeah,
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So
that's
he's cool. He's
crazy.
got a lot of good stories that that really will stretch your mind, boy.
Yeah, and even the Bermuda Triangle, there is that the same consistency with that weird green fog. It seems so sci-fi,
Yeah.
but that's what people talk about. What can you tell us about the research and experiments of Cornell's University's Daryl Byrne? I thought that was pretty interesting.
At Cornell and Ithaca, they have managed to find a way to manipulate the microwave spectrum of light, the microwave part of the light spectrum, to cloak two and now three-dimensional objects. And at first, they were only able to partially cloak them. But
Hmm.
I think recently, within the last month or so, they did succeed in completely cloaking. And we're talking very small, minuscule things. But what that is applied to again, and what the Philadelphia experiment had to do with that is the idea of rendering ships invisible to enemy radar.
Hmm.
Can you do that? And if you think about where cloaking came from, think back to Star Trek.
Yeah.
and the cloaking devices. And God, I think even Star Wars used that as a device. But yeah, Cornell is doing a lot of cool stuff. They are also doing a lot of stuff into uh, deja vu. Oh, what else? Quantum physics, putting particles in two places at once, which they've already
Yes,
done.
the dual
They,
slit experiment.
I'm thinking, you know, if there's any university in the country that is really at the edge of the most cutting edge of science, it's got to be them.
Well, it's awesome that some of these more conventional universities are taking a look at the paranormal stuff because for a long time they weren't. And I mean, whether you're of the opinion of it or not, I definitely think there is a group of people, powerful people, who have some type of knowledge and information that we don't have, and we're kind of operating without that. But it seems like there are some really interesting experiments going on with some really intense results that kind of do show us the underlying rules of the universe that we might not have understood before.
Absolutely. And the thing is, like you said, you hit it right on the head. This is just what we know about. You know,
Yeah,
these are just like the universities where they publicly publish their research. So we can imagine what might be being done under the radar,
hmm,
where you have universities that are working in conjunction with DARPA and SAIC and other entities that are behind doing the same research, but they're probably 20, 30 years ahead of what we publicly are aware of.
yeah.
And that's
That's
real frustrating too, because I think that, it's like we never know if we're getting what's happening now or if we have to add like 20 years of technology to what's coming out of Cornell
exactly.
to get the. But the thing is, I don't know. If they really had a time travel device, I really think that we would have some leaking of, documents or pictures. And I've never seen anything that
Right.
looked convincing. I mean, how people say, well, yeah, the government can keep secrets. Well, no, they can't because there's always conspiracy theorists breathing down their necks. A time machine, that would be the ultimate. You would have to figure somebody would have a picture, a video, some, I don't know, diagrams, blueprints.
You would think. You
I
would
haven't
think.
seen anything.
Well, one of another Terrence McKenna idea, I mean, I'm sure it's an idea that has been around, but I heard about it first from him, was the idea of time travel that um, you know, you wouldn't see any evidence of it up until the invention of the time machine. And then at that moment, you'd see time machines just popping up every freaking place
Yeah,
because that's as far
exactly.
back as you could go. That
Right.
is an interesting idea. And he also kind of theorized that that could be a possibility for December 21st. You
That
know,
would be interesting.
well, he says, it's a time where it's a new age of humanity, and what would be, more worth noting than the time branching off into a thousand different ways because of
Right.
this newfound technology. I mean,
Well, and that's the multiverse theory, and that's adding the dimension of time to that theory, which is just so popular in the physics community. So, I mean, if you're going to have alternate universes, you've got to have alternate timelines to go with them.
mhm.
And they can be infinite in number, which is kind of hurts your head to think about.
Well, you also did write that book 2013, and let me ask you about it, just for the simple fact that in less than 2 months, it can't really be asked again. We're getting close to it.
Oh, they'll
Uh,
just find a new date to pick on.
True, true, but it is kind of exciting to live in a time where, I mean, there's always predictions, but very few have as much weight to them as this Mayan prediction, and the I Ching calendar also kind of hints at this date. It's an exciting time to live through, even if nothing happens. But I
Yeah,
mean,
it
what are your
is.
thoughts on December 21st, 2012? Just another day?
I think for the majority of people, it's going to be another day. You have to figure, Israel may still be bombing the Gaza Strip, and
Unfortunately, yeah.
yeah, there'll be poverty in Somalia. For most people on the planet, it's another day. But for the people that are aware, you've got the three camps. You've got the camp that says nothing's going to happen. There's nothing to it. You've got the camp that is more the doom and gloom apocalyptic crowd, that it's going to be they've literally misinterpreted Mayan mythology by adding on Judeo-Christian tradition, and they're expecting the end of the world. Okay, but they're
Yeah,
going to be raptured though, so it's not going to affect them.
of
It should
course.
affect us. And then you have the new age metaphysical, more spiritual camp that thinks that this is a time of ascension, expansion of consciousness, activation of junk DNA where we will
Yeah.
become more capable. I'll tell you where I fall. I fall into the novelty theory, singularity, the idea that time is accelerating because the human brain is being exposed to more and more information that it must process and determine whether or not it's important enough to, you know, add to our reality. So it feels like time is speeding up, even though it's not. And we're at a point where very soon technology will overcome our humanity, where our
Mm-hmm.
brains will not be able to process the sheer volume of information that is coming at us. And that's when the moment of singularity occurs. So either our brains are going to completely shut down, or they're going to have to somehow adapt to this new amount of information. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what we're leading towards. It's more of an expansion of the ability of the brain, the capacity of what the brain can process.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I would really love that to be true. I mean, the way
yeah,
I've got some friends that, look at the DVD collection I have and they just roll their eyes and I'm like, "Look, look." I mean, I kind of think of it as terms of if you were in the first day of the Renaissance, it would seem like just another day, you know.
right.
But when you look at that period in history, you can find a time, a day where it kind of started. And I think
Everything
that
shifted.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think December 21st might be something like that because we're just going to think of it as another day, but when you look at it maybe 100 years in the future, you'll be like that was the catalyst right
Totally
there.
agree with you because I'm always saying to people, there is nothing in the Mayan mythology, in their cosmology, in their origin stories. There is nothing that says the world is going to end. That is
Mhm.
not what they say. That has been that is interpretation that has been added on over the last couple of thousand years by Western, trying to apply the
Right.
Gregorian calendar to their calendar, which is impossible, changing dates, manipulating, forgetting about leap year, this, that, and the other thing, and then piling on Judeo Christian or Western belief
Right.
onto a very pagan mythology. But here's the thing, they did believe in cycles, they did believe in world ages, they did believe we are coming to the end of one. But in their eyes, it was the end of life as we know it and the beginning of life, a
Right.
paradigm shift, so to
Which
speak.
makes me really like the idea that a time machine would pop up there because then you don't need to keep track of the cycles anymore because it's totally off the radar, you know?
Yeah, and also, I mean, a lot of people really feel like the shift that's going to occur is going to open up some of the doors that have been limiting and inhibiting us from controlling the temporal dimension,
Oh,
you know,
that'd be great.
and even we will go beyond even a three-dimensional experience. I mean, there's so much talk in the physics community of hypercubes and fifth dimension and beyond, sometimes even talk of 22, 32, an infinite number of other dimensions.
Mhm.
Our brains can only perceive three. So maybe something will force the brain to adapt to perceiving new spatial and temporal dimensions because we're too primitive, we're too archaic right now to continue to be able to process all of the information that is coming at the brain. Technology is going to, in 10 years, technology will look like magic to those of us now who think
Yeah.
it's pretty damn cool. I mean,
Right.
we don't keep up in terms of our mind, our mental ability to deal with this stuff. We're in trouble.
Well, and also before we go, I did want to switch gears a little bit and ask you about one of your other books, the 1111 time prompt phenomenon, because I have a friend who swears by this phenomenon. He says when he looks at the time or the odometer, he sees
Yep.
it's on 1111. Both the last
Me too.
names of him and his wife, they both have double L, which he finds meaning in. What do you make of this 1111 thing?
I never knew it even existed before we were asked to write the book. That was actually we gave our publisher, which was really cool. But um, I see them all the time. I posted something on Facebook that my coffee machine, the clock won't work now. So every time I look at it, it says 11:11 or 3:33, which is another time prompt that
Yes.
a lot of people experience. But the thing about 11:11 is you got millions of people all over the world for the last 40, 50 years, because this has gone on for quite a while,
Mm-hmm.
who see this number sequence. And it can be on a digital clock, it can be on a receipt, whatever, a billboard. And where Larry and I were able to make the connection is that whatever happens on December 21st, 2012, next month, the winter solstice, which was critical to the Mayan, to their
Uh,
worldview, is said to occur. The moment the winter solstice begins is at 11:11 Greenwich Mean Time, according to the Naval Observatory's atomic clock, which is the most
oh shit.
accurate clock on the planet.
Oh shit.
So people feel like the 11:11s are prompts or pokes, like little prods from the universe saying, pay attention, get ready, wake up, something's coming, and that moment, who knows what will happen. Maybe nothing, but maybe people's minds and their brains will just shift and we'll suddenly start seeing the sixth dimension.
That would be the best. I mean,
Yeah,
for
hey.
someone as lazy as myself, I would love to just wake up one day and like, now I can see crazy shit.
Yeah,
That'd be great.
I've ascended. Woohoo!
Right.
We just
Man.
have to make breakfast, and go to work. But no, I think that a lot of people feel like they're wake up calls to just get present, pay attention to what's going on. And you know what? That's not a bad thing to do anyway, regardless of December 21st.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, Marie, you have an amazing body of work, but I'm sure you're not just kicking back and waiting for the apocalypse. What else are you working on?
Well, Larry and I just signed with a new publisher, Hampton Roads Hierophant, to write the book The Grid, which is about our attempt to give a structure to reality. And oh gosh, we've got a couple of screenplays that we've optioned that are one is in pre-production called 19 Hertz.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
it's based on our book The Resonance Key about the power of sound. Uh,
Nice.
just all kinds of stuff. Yeah, next year is going to be a busy year.
Nice. Well, where can people check up on you? You have obviously you have a website.
Yeah, my website is Marie